3 because 3 and 12 are really similar, so it's better to do those back to back. And also chapter 3 is like all linear regression, which is very algebra 2-ish. And it's a really good one to do right before the AP exam. All right, so chapter 3 will be later. Chapter 4 is actually kind of a tough chapter for some people. So be sure you work very hard on this chapter. It's all vocab and like no math. Okay, so I think that's why maybe some people don't like it. It's less mathy.
That's a good thing for me.
Yeah, it's good for some people. That's true. It's good for some. All right, so today we're going to learn what's the population and what's the sample. All right, because we basically always take a sample to make some kind of inference about a population. And then we're going to talk about bad ways to sample, like voluntary response and convenience sampling. And we'll explain how those lead to bias, which is just an over or underestimate of the truth. Okay. And then we'll talk about ways to sample. So I would write down these definitions. Population would be the entire group of individuals we want information about. So maybe I want to know the average height of all the Devlin students. Then my population is the Devlin students, okay? And I would take a sample of maybe 30 kids, hopefully spread out amongst all the grades, right? And I would average their height. So a sample is just a subset from the population where we actually collect the data. All right, so the population is a larger group. Be careful on the population on what you can expand to, right? So if I take my sample from Devlin, can I then apply that to Columbine? No. Can I then apply it to the general broader population of all like high school students? No. All right, so just be careful that where you take your sample from, that's how you can generalize your results, is only to that population where you took the sample from, okay? All right, identify the population in the sample. So they'll have you do this in the homework tonight. Just identify what's the population, what's the sample. A furniture maker buys hardware in large batches. The supplier is supposed to dry the wood before shipping because wood that isn't dry won't hold its size and shape. The furniture maker chooses 5 pieces of wood from each batch and tests their moisture content. If any piece exceeds 12%, the entire batch is sent back. Let's start with the sample. Raise your hand if you can tell me what the sample is. Yep, what do you think? Yep, and who can tell me what the population is? Yep. I don't know if it's all the batches because you're doing it for each batch. So I would just say the one batch that you took the sample from. But I guess if you're taking a sample from each batch, then yes, each batch is the population. But each population is different, right? Because if I have over 12%, that relates to that one batch where I ship it back. Right? So my sample only goes with the one batch that I took the 5 pieces from. Okay? Okay. All right. Each week, the Gallup poll questions a sample of about 1,500 adults, U.S. residents, to determine national opinion on a wide variety of issues. Okay? Raise your hand if you can tell me what the sample is. Somebody different. I know. I already got you too. Anybody? Anyone else? Yes, Clinton. Yes, and you would say the 1,500 adult U.S. residents. Okay. And what about the population now? All U.S. residents. Okay. So can I expand this to any other country? No. Maybe we're asking about some political opinion. Who are you voting for president or something if it's an election year, right? And you could then expand that to the broader population of all U.S. citizens if you get a good sample of 1,500. Okay. Which we'll talk about. So a sample survey is a study that collects data from a sample that is chosen to represent a specific population. All right, so just any study that's collecting data. I don't know that we need to write that definition down, all right? It's pretty basic. Sample survey is just collecting data from the sample. So they're bringing up basically how we do unemployment rate. So you would want to be really careful to define what is unemployment rate. For example, is a college student who does not work, are they considered unemployed? Nope, not if they're not looking for a job. All right? If you're not looking for a job, you're not considered unemployed because you're just being a student. That's what you're doing, all right? Even if you're taking a vacation, are you considered unemployed? No. All right, so you want to be really careful with what's considered unemployed, and usually it has to be defined by someone actually attempting to find a job who cannot find a job. That's unemployment rate. All right, so we're looking at percent of the population actually trying to find a job that is unable to find one. All right, how to sample badly. Okay. One way to sample badly is called a convenience sample. Let's say I was like, hey, I want to know how much homework the Devlin students are doing. And so I stand by the library after school and I ask like 30 kids who are in the library how much homework they did. Do you think I'm going to get an overestimate or an underestimate? Yeah. I just asked all the kids at the library who are like literally studying in that moment. So that would be called a convenience sample, where it's like easy to reach people, but it's going to give me either an over or an underestimate. In this case, an overestimate. All right, bias is not necessarily just asking the question in like a biased way, right? Sometimes we think of bias as like, oh, this is just going to create bias. Bias is actually any kind of overestimate or underestimate. Okay, it's just when you basically get the wrong answer, right? Like I estimated the height of all the Devlin kids, but somehow I got all the sixth graders. So I got an underestimate. Okay, right? We're just talking. So bias, honestly, is just anytime it's like not the right answer. It's not even close, okay? We somehow created bias where we overestimated what we were trying to find or we underestimated what we were trying to find, basically by surveying poorly. So a convenience sample will create bias. A convenience sample is not a good way to estimate. Voluntary response sample consists of people who choose themselves by responding to a general invitation. So if I put up on my Snapchat and I'm like, hey, how much homework did you do last night? And only the people who care respond, that's going to be a problem, all right? If you're listening to a political talk show and it's from one side of the spectrum and they ask people to call in to tell you their opinion, you're going to get the people who care and who align with that talk show, most likely, okay? So any voluntary response is probably an overestimate because the people who actually care are going to call in or are going to respond, okay? So far we just have a convenience sample where it's just kind of an easy way to get an estimate, and we have a voluntary response where people choose themselves. So unfortunately, when you guys do your projects, you don't want to do the whole post to your Snapchat thing. You want to like force people to answer your question. I'm just kidding, but you kind of do try. You try to get like 30 people and those 30 respond, okay? And if you don't get those people, the people that got picked, you like start over, because what if some of those people don't answer? Their voice needs to be heard, okay? There's a reason they didn't respond. So you got to get everybody from your sample, okay? So on the AP test, there are two things when it asks for bias. Identify the problem which usually means I'm going to say it's a convenience sample or it's a voluntary response. We're going to have other ones too, okay, other bad methods. You're going to pick the bad method, and then you're going to say, I think this is going to lead to an overestimate or an underestimate of the truth, okay? And you can't fix bias by like fixing the math. You have to fix it with how you gathered your data, okay? So for example, explain how using your statistics class as a sample to estimate the proportion of all high school students who own a graphing calculator could lead to bias. So I'm like, hey, how many of you own a graphing calculator? And like every single kid. And so then can I be like, oh, it's 100% of Devlin's students have a graphing calculator? No. All right, what kind of sample did I do? Convenience, because you're all located close. It was real easy for me to just ask you because you're right here. All right, convenience sample, and I got an overestimate because you guys all have calculators, okay? All right, former CNN commentator Lou Dobbs doesn't like illegal immigration. One of his shows was largely devoted to attacking a proposal to offer driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. During the show, Mr. Dobbs invited his viewers to go to loudobbs.com to vote on the question, would you be more or less likely to vote for a presidential candidate who supports giving driver's license to illegal aliens? The result, 97% of the 7,350 people who voted by the end of the show said less likely. What kind of sample is this? Voluntary response, okay? So we have a little problem. How could this lead to bias? So is this an overestimate or an underestimate? Overestimate, okay? All right, a farmer brings a juice company several crates of oranges each week. A company inspector looks at 10 oranges from the top of each crate before deciding whether to buy all the oranges. What kind of sample? Convenience. Do you think it's an overestimate of nice oranges or an underestimate? Probably an overestimate. I'm gonna put my best oranges on top. All right, so probably an overestimate. I don't know. Sometimes you're guessing on over or underestimate, but if you can say why it makes sense, they're gonna give you the credit, okay? Maybe you say under because those are the most damaged ones on the top, okay? That would make sense. You could say that, all right? But it's definitely a convenience sample. All right, the ABC program Nightline once asked whether the United Nations should continue to have its headquarters in the United States. Viewers were invited to call one telephone number to respond yes and another for no. There was a charge for calling either number. More than 186,000 callers responded and 67% said no. Should we move the United Nations? All right, what kind of response? What is this one? Yeah, the bias is voluntary response, okay? And do you think it's an over or an underestimate? It is typically an overestimate on these because they called in, so it's likely to be higher than the truth, right? If they called in, they cared enough to call in and press a button. Everyone else that did not care did not call in. So typically those are overestimates, okay? All right, how to sample well. Don't write down the purple, write down the yellow. Okay, random sampling uses a chance process to determine which members are included in the sample. That's what random sampling is. But write down a simple random sample, an SRS. This is very important that you know how to find a simple random sample. Okay, there are a bunch of sampling methods. This is the one we're going to start with, and this is the one you're going to do the most. Bless you, 25 times. Shoo. All right, a random sample, an SRS of size n, is chosen in such a way that every group of n individuals in the population has an equal chance to be selected as the sample. Now, they will ask you this question several times in several ways, and they're going to say something like this. An SRS means every individual has the same chance of being chosen. And that's the wrong answer, okay? Don't ever pick, even though it sounds right, don't ever pick the one that says every single individual has the same chance of being chosen. It has to be every group of size N, whatever that group is. So maybe I want to sample 30 Devlin students and figure out how tall they are, all right? So that means that every group of 30 has to have the same chance of being chosen. Maybe I want to ask 10 people, which is fine. Your sample size can be whatever, but it can't be 1, all right? So that would mean that every group of 10 has the same chance of being chosen. All right, so that's what a simple random sample is. Be sure you pick the one that has every group of size N. Not every individual has the same chance of being chosen. These are the 3 good ways to do a simple random sample. You have to explain using sentences how to do these, even though it seems obvious. Okay? Hat method. So you could be like, I'm going to write every Devlin kid's name on a piece of paper, an equally sized piece of paper. I'm going to put them in a hat. I'm going to shake it up. That's a lot of names, okay? But whatever, maybe a bucket. And then I'm going to draw out 30 names. That's hat method, okay? Calculator random integer is another method that works. So on your calculator, we'll find where this is. Okay, you go to like menu, statistics, random integer, all right? And you can tell the calculator to choose 30 numbers for you, all right? But you would have to number everybody. So I'm going to number all the Devlin kids 1 through 1,200. And then I'm going to use my calculator to pick 30 unique numbers. And those are the kids I'm going to go be like, how tall are you? Okay? And then table D, we're going to learn that at another time. It has random integers in the back of the book. And we'll learn that as well. It's another method for choosing a good sample. This is a good method of sampling. We're going to do this tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. All right. We have no worksheet because I forgot to make copies, and honestly, this is pretty easy. So we'll just do the homework in the book, okay? 1, 3, 6, 7, 9, 10. Hopefully you can get this done before you go.